Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to another episode of As I Live and Grieve. Yes, I've got another cold. Seems I had one a couple months ago, but the weather up here in upstate New York is just cold appropriate. It really is. So you'll have to pardon my gravelly voice and the occasional cough if I do that. But hey, you know, it's me. You've known me for 4 years now. With me today is Ken Rutley. He is a delightful person, and we have become fast friends. Ken, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kathy. I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we have sort of talked about previously.
No, me too. You know, we always, whenever we get together, we start to talk about our initial focus, and then we kind of segue into who knows what. And that was no different today. So we have focused now and hit the record button. So we're going to talk about music and grief. So Ken, before we get started, would you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
I'd be happy to. I guess the first place to start is I've always been a music fan. And growing up as a kid, we, as a family, had a very eclectic kind of music collection. So I grew up listening to lots of popular music from the 60s and also listening to operas and musicals and things of that nature. So I've always had a love for music in all kinds of genres. And as I got older, I sort of gravitated to, well, popular kind of music, but other things as well. And I guess I have a real appreciation for different genres. Some I like more than others. I think we could say that about all of us.
Right.
But yeah, so I've always kind of been a music fan per se. And I played instruments in bands in high school and little garage bands after I'd finished high school and that kind of thing. How we met was at Camp Widow in Toronto back in November.
Right.
And I remember sitting down beside you and we just kind of got talking. And I discovered that you had a podcast, and you had, through that, I had told you that I have a podcast as well. And my podcast is about music, almost like the traditional mixtape from way back in the day. And so that's what mine's about. I'm new to being a widow. I have 2 children, one 22 and one 17, both daughters and both adopted from China. And we're working through, I guess, the first year of not having Lindy, their mother, and my wife around anymore. And just sort of the transition. I don't even want to say transition. That's not the right word. Just the journey. I think that's the better word that we're having now is challenging at times, but times we remember who she was and what she did for us as a mother and as a wife and partner and just good human being. And that does help us kind of get through the tough times. But it's a journey I never thought I'd be taking. And now that I'm on it, I realize, once you become a widow, you really appreciate other widows and what they can do for you. And that's really why we're here. You and I met in Camp Widow, and here we are having a discussion about how grief can sort of sometimes be tempered or by music.
Yeah. We all know that with grief comes a variety of symptoms, not the least of which are anger, sadness, just devastation.
Very true.
Sometimes joy.
Yes.
When you latch onto that memory that makes you smile.
Yeah.
I know I have a bunch of those. And for me, as time goes on, I find myself probably smiling more than crying. And I don't really know when that evolution took place.
Yeah.
Like you, Ken, music was a huge part of my life as I was growing up. I was always in the church choir. I think probably from the time I was 6, they had a children's choir, and then there was a youth choir, and then I was in the adult choir. I was in band in high school. I played clarinet. I was in the band. I was in concert band. I was in march band. I was in pep band. I was in a clarinet ensemble.
Wow.
Music was just a part of my life. It just was. I took piano lessons starting at the age of 4 until I was about 14. I could sit down now and play chopsticks and probably, blunder through a piece of sheet music, but it doesn't come naturally to me. I was always one that had to practice at it.
Right.
But because of that, and because of the many car trips with family, and my father always had the radio on,
Yes.
and and would be singing. He was in barbershop quartet in addition to church choir, but music was always a part of our lives. Everything from music back in the 40s right up to and including today's music. My older grandson, Nate, is in a band, and they play a lot of Guns N' Roses and Alice in Chains and all of those. And guess what? This grandma's at every gig,
so
because music is part of my life.
And I think it's wonderful that you have that sort of supportive relationship with your grandson. I'm just wondering what you would be wearing at a heavy metal gig or a hard rock gig.
Fortunately, the gigs he plays are at local establishments, and they're more just, I can wear my jeans and T-shirt. Okay. I do have a Slash T-shirt that he bought me that I have not yet been able to wear to a gig because it's recent.
Oh, okay.
He recently went to Toronto when Slash was there.
Yeah.
And actually, I gifted him with the VIP ticket for him and his mom, who went with him, my daughter Stephanie, and they got to sit into a what do they call it? The audio check.
Oh, sound check.
The sound check with Slash himself on stage, and they were like in the front row and very close, and that was a treat for Nate.
Oh, I could imagine.
But yeah, the point is, music's always been a part of my life, and without realizing it, I found that I would gravitate to different music depending on what I was feeling.
Yeah,
okay.
I share that.
And
with you.
as I was a single mom, this was single mom due to divorce back when my kids were younger. They would have trouble sleeping at night, so I would put classical music on, things like Moonlight Sonata or something. Yes. I found it relaxed them a little bit. They would focus on the melody, and they would just kind of doze off, because that's what I would do as well. Yeah. If I needed to motivate myself, I would put something rousing on, and I don't even know. A lot of times I know the songs. I may not know the title or the artist, but that's just me. I just know the feeling it gives me. Yeah. Lately, I've been into a new album that's out by John Baptiste.
Okay.
He took some classical pieces and fused them with jazz.
Oh, okay.
And it's a very interesting album, and I just love it. And the reason jazz has come back is because Nate, the grandson, again, he's a senior in college, and he's majoring in music, the audio production theory. So he's learning to be a sound engineer and all that to bolster his music career. And he's also in a jazz ensemble and has really come to enjoy jazz.
Oh, okay.
So we were talking about that.
Huh. That's really interesting.
In your podcast and everything, what's your angle on music? Do you approach it like from the chart busters? Do you approach it from artist by artist? What's your approach?
Okay, so I am a collector of music in physical forms. So yes, I have a turntable. So I have a collection of records, like vinyl records. I still have a CD player, which I use quite often. So I have, I would say, a modest collection of CDs. And I also have some cassettes. At one point in my possession, I actually had an 8-track player, but I got rid of that because, one, it wasn't working. And two, when you find 8-tracks in the vintage wild, I'll call it, or scrounging around,
in the vintage
they're always really in bad shape. And so, you're buying it for the novelty of having it, but the sound is, that's why it's nice to be able to buy CDs still. People don't want them, but, and so anyways, my podcast sort of takes a theme. So maybe the theme might be movie soundtracks. All right. So I'll curate what's in my collection, and then I'll take out songs, like making a mixtape. So it's like, okay, I'm making this kind of mixtape for someone who might be like this or whatever. And then you pick out the songs, and then you curate them, and then you sort of plunk them in. And then I just talk a little bit about the background of the song, or maybe the artist, or how I feel it fits into the podcast. And then, Kathy, I'll let myself stream one song. And the one song I stream is kind of my way of saying, I stole this one off the radio. Remember the days I used to and you would have no intro. It would just cut in sharply, and you would have, because the DJ was talking at the beginning of the song. So I count that as being able to stream a song, or you borrow an album from somebody or
Right,
what have you,
right.
right? So anyway, so that's kind of what it is. It's a 12-song show. And I stream it over, or I only stream it on Spotify for the very reason that Spotify has an agreement with artists that if you're podcasting, you can use songs in their full, like the full song. That's what I want to say.
Really?
Yeah.
Without worrying about paying fees and everything
Exactly.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Really?
yes. So that's why I'm just kind of a Spotify podcaster at this point, because the whole underlying idea is that you want to have the whole song there so you can sort of go into a more in-depth kind of experience on a platform where you're only allowed to play a few seconds or 30 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same impact. So,
Yeah.
so I realize it, maybe less people will hear it, but I think having the full song is really important to the essence of what it is. So that's
Yes, and let's face it, we don't always do podcasting just so a number of people can hear it.
No.
Sometimes we do it just because we feel we have something to say, and we know that there are listeners who want to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's I do it because I'm retired now. And I guess I need something to keep me out of trouble, so that's what I'll be doing. Right now, it's on hiatus. My wife died, and my mother had died a few months previous to that.
Yeah.
So it was a long, kind of tough go, and
Yeah.
I just had to put that particular passion on the
Right.
back burner. And now that things are starting to, get back on track, I'm thinking more and more about let's get this thing going again, because I really enjoyed it.
Yes, well, come on, let's give me credit here, Ken. I'm having you on this podcast, and that's giving you the fever again.
It has. It actually has. I wake up every morning and I say, I can't let Kathy down. I gotta get this episode again. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No,
right.
well, you know what? It has been nice to sort of have, someone like you sort of, take an interest in it and make me sort of rekindle the fire I had for that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and I have to admit, if I was doing a podcast just totally solo, I probably would have quit long ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's having guests every week that really keep it alive for me, because I love the people and I always learn something.
Yeah.
Okay. A question for you. Music has been vital in your life.
Yes.
And you recently actually had 2 losses.
Yes.
Did you turn to music in your grief?
Heavily, especially with regard to Lindy, my wife. It has been a way for me to release a lot of the emotion that comes with grieving. And I have a little playlist, and I have several little playlists.
Yeah.
But one of them is called the Missing You playlist. And there's songs that either remind me of things that we had done together, whether it be she and I or as a family, and also songs that just have that kind of quality of just, you can't help but let them allow them to tap into what you're feeling. And they just bring forth emotion. And a lot of them are, kind of crying songs, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I will listen to that, and it will make me,
It'll have the desired effect.
It will have the desired effect, but also not only that, it will just, it's almost, Kathy, it's almost like you have permission to become emotional, right?
Yeah,
like you're listening to a sad song, and some people find it very difficult to show emotion and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have it within that kind of context, well, you're allowed to cry at a sad song, right? And so it kind of allows you a little bit of leniency to be vulnerable with yourself or whatever, right? Yeah.
I like that. I think you may have coined a new phrase. Music is permission to feel. Yeah, I like that.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you
Now, did you find that it was only when you had a certain type of feeling, like when you were really sad or when you got angry, or was it only with a certain feeling that you would turn to music?
I don't know if there's, I think it's almost as if, how there's the grieving phases of grief, and they say, right? I still am very much in the phase of missing her desperately. And, waking up in a bed where it's now just, instead of the 3 of us, because I'm including the dog in there. It's just the dog and I that wake up in the morning in the bed. And so there's, as you probably know, you can't walk through your home without having literally hundreds of memories come at you.
It's like stubbing your toe.
Yeah. And, everywhere I look, there's something of her remains, right?
Yes.
So I think at this point, it's almost like a bit of a maybe I'm going through a transitionary sort of phase, but the first part was really sad kind of songs, and songs that either the music itself I found sad, or the lyrics I found sad. In some cases, the combination of both was something. And I've realized that every sad song you listen to is written by the sad person who wrote it. And having said that, you find little consistencies in every song that speak to you very directly. And it's almost like you take those out, and it's not even necessarily the whole piece, but maybe those little snippets that really resonate with you. And that's what I kind of find with myself, is there's either a lyric or a passage that it really means even more, because it touches me so personally and reminds me of so many things that were part of our life together.
Right.
Yeah.
And admittedly, that same phrase, those same lyrics could mean something entirely different to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because music is very personal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we react to it much the way we grieve, totally in a unique way.
Yes. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. It's just that.
Yeah.
And that's what I found when I was in Toronto at the camp where we both were, is that how unique each person's experience was, right? And then so how we were all there because we lost a partner, but just the stories there were so different. And so, like you say, the stories are different, the grieving is different, and what you take from a piece of music will be different as well, and very personalized to you. And I think that's what makes it so powerful, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have a go-to song?
I actually do have one, and it's a song I've really, as far as the grief context goes, it's a song I've listened to and has been part of my sort of inventory of things I've always sort of, I guess, relied on. Maybe that's a way of putting it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. It's a band from Los Angeles. They're called Concrete Blonde. Have you heard of Concrete Blonde?
No.
Okay, well, maybe your grandson might know Concrete Blonde.
He probably does.
Yeah.
He knows it all.
Yeah, well, there you go. But Concrete Blonde has a song called Mexican Moon. Mexican Moon by Concrete Blonde. Okay. And what the song is really basically about is just that there's this woman singing about, losing somebody, and she's in Mexico, and she's singing this song under the Mexican moon. And just the intro itself for me is something that, there's an acoustic guitar, and it really draws me in. And then the lead singer of this band, her name is Jeanette Napolitano or something, and something along those lines. Jeanette, if you ever hear this, my apologies to you. But she has kind of like the Kathy Cold voice, and it's got a raspiness to it. And the lyrics, her vocal style, and just the composition of the song itself, can't help but get emotional when I hear that song. That's probably like my go-to one. Another song that I really quite like is by Duran Duran.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. And anyways, I'm sure you have. I guess were kind of popular at one time. Still going, by the way.
They were, yeah.
Still going.
Aren't they all?
Aren't
they all?
Well, some of them, yeah. But still going. Good for them. And anyways, they have a song called Ordinary World. I'm not sure, but that's also one worth checking out, just about going through your life after an event and wondering, when's it going to get back to being ordinary, or how can you ever, and almost realizing that what does ordinary even mean, right?
Exactly.
And that kind of thing is, and it's like when people say, don't worry, Ken, we'll get back to normal. Well, my normal was having Lindy in my life, and that was my normal. If anything, they should be saying, oh, well, don't worry, Ken, it's going to be abnormal soon enough.
Yeah. Well, I don't, eventually it'll get to a point where it's ordinary.
Yeah.
It'll never be the same.
No.
It'll never be the same, but it'll be ordinary again at some point.
Yeah.
Okay. Off the cuff question.
Okay.
What emotion do you have when one of these songs ends?
Wow, that's a good question. I guess sometimes it's the emotion of, I guess there's a contentment or a happiness, because maybe at that particular time, as going through the song, maybe the lasting impression I have is a positive one, right? And so maybe you get a little bit of that content happiness coming out of it. Sometimes they're like drinking beer. as soon as you've had one, you're sad, so you have another one to kind of keep that thing going. Because there has been times where it's just kind of been with, a specific kind or a certain kind of day. You know how it is. Let's have another one because I really need to kind of work through some things. So sometimes it's a lot of, it can vary. It really can vary.
Yeah, sure.
Today, what I'm starting to do now, you might find this interesting, is I'm trying to find one song each day to try and see what my, wrap up maybe a quick impression of emotions and feelings, in the morning when I wake up. And today's song was actually by Tom Petty. And you probably know the song, Even the Losers, right? Mm-hmm. So I woke up with that song in my sort of nestled in my head because for me, the time when I met Lindy, it was a time for me where I was a little hard on myself.
Okay.
And this song kind of talks about this guy who meets someone and realizes what this person means to him and what sort of transpires from that. And what I take from that is that, I was at a downtime. I met a human being who I know personally changed who I was as a person and had the impression on me of, I know without hesitation that she motivated and supported me in a way that allowed me to become a better human being. And that's probably why I'm so devastated that she's gone, is that she was such a positive force in my life. And so anyways, I was listening to this Tom Petty song because it was kind of like, I kind of lucked out. It was at a time where I was really down about myself and wondering what was going to be my life. And then I met somebody who made me realize how special that it is to have an opportunity to live on this planet and even meet somebody.
Yes.
And that's what I sometimes say to people. They'll say, oh my gosh, everything would be better if I won the lottery. Right?
Oh, yeah, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But then I sort of, my sort of response is, well, okay, so let's just look at the odds of you just being alive, let alone meeting someone else who just happens to be alive.
Right.
And you two getting together and sharing your life with one another. And then at some point, maybe others share the life with you, children or what have you.
Sure.
And you think of what are the odds of that? And they're so infinitesimally huge, right? That you've already won your lottery.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's kind of what I sort of...
That's a great way to look at it. It's a great way to look at it. Okay, questions on mixtapes. Because I realize that some of our listeners might have heard the phrase, but they may not really know what is a mixtape.
Yes. In fact, I think in this the modern context with them kids these days, I think it's kind of like...
Now it's a playlist.
Well, it's a playlist, or a mixtape might be something that an individual puts out as an independent kind of record on their own. Sometimes I think called a mixtape. So let's clarify for your audience, who, however old they or may be or not
Quite
be.
a range.
Quite a range.
Quite a range.
In the old days...
When Kathy was a child.
Well, okay. Well, I don't know if it's that far back, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Anyways, we had these goofy things called cassettes.
Yeah.
And we also had records and also other cassettes. So the thing is if you wanted to share your music with someone, you would say, I have a few songs I'd like to share, or maybe you have a person that you're interested in, and maybe you say, I made you a mixtape, which is it's almost like pouring out your soul in a way.
Yes.
Depending on the context.
It's like the notes you used to write in the classroom when you were in grade school.
Absolutely.
Do you like me? Check yes.
Or check no. Yeah. Or maybe my notes were more like, do you think you could like me?
There you go. Yeah.
But anyway, so you would get your cassette and you would cue up your record player and you would find the song and you would drop the needle on that song and start recording, and then that goes onto the cassette. And so you would either continue doing that with records, or sometimes some people were very fortunate and had, dual cassette players. Did you ever have one of those? Where you had, so you could record songs off cassettes to other cassettes, and you would just make a playlist, like I said previously, from the music you had access to. And then you'd make that playlist for whoever it was, and then write down all the songs on the paper insert that came with every cassette. And you'd write down all the songs. And then if you were really maybe taken with the individual you were giving the tape to, you might cut some kind of picture out of a magazine or draw something on there and call it a something mix, right?
Yeah.
It was like you always called it the something mix. So it'd be like the walking on a rainy day mix. And, you know, you'd have your songs like that, either just a collection to share with a friend or one's professing your deep love, your deep junior high school love.
I was a recipient of a number of mixtapes. I received a number
of
them. I did.
I bet you did.
I did. I never gifted any though.
Oh, I see. So every tape you got was like, yeah, this is nice, but no, I'm not making one for you.
I never gifted one.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's kind of interesting. It's not too late.
I think it's because I think it's because I have trouble making decisions, so I could never decide what songs I wanted to put on.
Well, that's an excellent point. You know, maybe you had too much access to music. You know, you weren't one of those people who had like, okay, I've got 10 records. 10 records and 4 tapes. How do I make this work?
And I remember actually, and you know, I'm certainly never going to mention names, but I remember actually recording over some of the mixtapes that I didn't like.
Okay,
but,
now what?
That's a story for another day.
I can imagine. Maybe next time if I come on, we'll talk about the mixtapes in my life and why they caused me grief.
There we go. That might make a good session on your podcast. So, knowing now what a mixtape is.
Yes.
Okay. And it's a series of songs that mean something to you that you might share with someone.
Absolutely.
And I think I mentioned this to you before, but here's my challenge to you. How many songs are on a mixtape approximately?
Well, okay, so it really depends because back in the day we could buy a 60-minute cassette or a 90-minute cassette, right? So, well, you know that, right? I guess, you know, 60 or 90 or whatever. Yeah. So I would say you would probably get anywhere like a 60-minute. I'm thinking you would probably, and it depends on the song, because if you're putting on like Roundabout by Yes, that's like one side of a tape, maybe. I don't know.
Fair enough.
But I would say a good number is probably between, depending on the cassette length, I think you'd probably be talking about 12 to 20 songs.
Okay. Yeah. If we took the number 12.
Okay. That's what my show's about too. 12 songs. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yep. You did say that. Okay. 12 songs related to grief. Yep. But the challenge is to have it start with the music that will evoke tears.
Okay. So tear music.
Yep.
Okay.
And then have it progress almost like an ombre color. You know how color will go in tie-dye, you see it especially. It'll go from a deep, deep navy blue, and then it gradually changes shades until it's a pale, pale pastel type blue. Yep. All right, have it go an ombre effect to the 12th song being one that gives you hope. Okay. Or gives you the empowerment to continue on.
Okay. So you're saying that...
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was almost you could almost find specific things related to grief patterns or grief cycle.
I mean, the one that comes to mind is the fight song. You know, this is my fight song. Yeah. Or even Take Me to Church, you know, something like that. I don't know, but things like that. They would certainly change from tone of music, key, everything, pacing, all the way up. But my thought is that as we progress in our grief, our periods of deep, deep sadness do lessen. So at some point on a grief journey, it might be nice that if you all of a sudden have that day that you wake up and, oh my gosh, the memories are just heavy, that feeling has just come back, that you could put this playlist, mixtape, whatever, you could put this on and it would help draw you out of that sadness. And give you a little bit more optimism to go forward into your day. That's my thought. Yeah. I think that is a marketable item.
What, are we discussing a business plan here openly on your podcast?
We could be. We could be. But I wonder if something like that would be effective.
I think, yes, it would be. But here's the kind of thing I might find it might be a little challenging in that I'm actually reading an interesting book right now called This Is What It Sounds Like. And it's by this woman, Susan Rogers, who was a producer of records and things like that. And I'm realizing from reading her book that because, and as we had said this before, music is so personal, I might create a playlist that you and I think is, oh, this is fantastic, and then another person might say, oh, what a horrible tune.
Well, that's very true.
It
That's
makes
very
it
true.
worse for me, so
Yeah.
that would be, I think, the challenge. And she was talking in her book about like the triple crown in music is having the respect of critics, having the respect of other musicians, and also having the appeal to the public. And she said very few artists can hit the triple crown, right? Because there are some that are fantastic with the public, but other musicians wouldn't really respect them, right?
Yeah.
Or there's ones that are maybe musicians like or what have you, and the public's on, but the critics will say this is really not that great an album.
Yeah.
And so you have
what do critics know?
There you go. I didn't put them in. I didn't list them in order of hierarchy for critics. Everybody hates them. Right.
You want the listeners first because they're the ones that are going to pay the money
for it.
That's
right. But then again, it's kind of like when you think about it, there's also the side of, when you say that, you want the listeners, a lot of musicians would say, yeah, but by doing that, I'm giving up my creativity. Right. So I have to put out something that people will love to, let's say, consume for for lack of a better word, but maybe don't honor their integrity. Right. So it's really, it's more complicated than I realized from reading this book.
Well, it is. Yeah. It is. And any type of creativity is that way. Writing a book is the same way. Who are you writing for? Who's your audience? Podcasting is that way when you think about it. Who's your audience? And you just do what you feel is right and go on with it until it proves otherwise. Fortunately, there's no money riding on this podcast. So, this is really, truly my gift to everyone.
Well, it's a lovely gift.
And that's why I don't have ads.
Yeah.
I don't want it interrupted because I think grief is a topic where you shouldn't have paid ads, sponsored ads in there. And who's going to advertise? Funeral homes?
Yeah.
I don't like listening to those ads on the TV. That's just me personally.
Oh, yeah,
anyway, I could go off on a tangent.
I think,
for that one.
That's right. Lots of advertisers like funeral homes.
Yeah, Kathy put the soapbox away.
Yeah.
At any rate, I think for me personally, it would be interesting to have that playlist.
Yeah, or even have it as this is what is resonating for me, or this is the way I see it. And then someone inevitably is going to say, oh, well, that's an interesting idea, but I think I'd personalize it to me by maybe keeping some of these, but I would add this in here or add that in there, right?
Well, then maybe the business becomes creating a personalized mixtape.
Yeah. You could.
That's a service you could sell. I'm trying to give you some business ideas.
Yeah, I know.
Here,
I like it. I just didn't realize. I didn't realize I was going into a business.
I didn't either. But see, that's what we talked about the podcast and how I don't use a script.
Yeah,
that's what organic conversations
do.
I
love it. I think it's fantastic.
At any rate, our time is winding down. So what I want to do at this point is turn the microphone over to you and just let you have the floor.
Sure. If you want to, if something I say cues or triggers your curiosity, feel free to jump in, because as you had said previously, sometimes when you're just talking on your own, you're kind of like, when you start to have to focus on listening just to yourself, it becomes a little bit like, I don't know why anyone would want to listen to me in the first place.
I hear you.
Yes. All right. So just a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about my podcast. The podcast, as I said, is on Spotify, and the title of the podcast is called Scratch Made a Mixtape. And it's just basically an exploration of an appreciation of having music in physical forms and how that experience now is starting, it's having resurgence, but it's about the fact that you go and you take an album out of your collection and you slide it out of the album cover, the jacket, and there's liner notes and there's lyrics. And so as you are having this experience of listening to this song or this album, you get taken up with the other elements that are there, like the album art, or with the liner notes, and you find out about the band and those kind of things. And I think that's so much more, it's a fuller experience than just going through a screen up and down or whatever, and then putting your finger on a song and instantly it's there. And I had an interesting conversation with a friend recently, and her daughter has started to get into vinyl records, and they have a turntable at their house, and she's kind of like, well, how do I skip to the next song? And no, you don't. you go and you hear what's there and you listen to it in an order that was very deliberate. And so the whole point of the podcast is to appreciate music in physical forms, whether it's cassette, record, compact disc, but also going through what you have and touching on what's inside you to honor the theme that might be of that mixtape. So one of the tapes I did was about my mother and I and the music we listened to and the music she listened to in her youth, because she grew up as a young Japanese woman during the Second World War. So she has some interesting stories during war and post-war, and just some of the music that she enjoyed from that particular era as well. And so it's just really a celebration of a older media format so that people of this day and age kind of know what was involved in making a playlist. It's kind of like teaching someone how to make bread, right? The process of
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then you just don't go to the store and say, oh, this one has sesame seeds. Or da, 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 da. You go,
right.
The whole thing was a process, right? And by
Right.
going into a process like that one, or making a mixtape, it also reflects a little bit on who you are and what your motives might be, or whatever else, emotionally goes into that, while you kind of curate and try and find just that right piece to put in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and a personal story I have to inject. Nate, older grandson, is in college and he's majoring in music, audio, production theory. I don't know if that's the actual, but anyway, a lot of his projects, if you will, for his music classes are that the professor will give them a song, give each student a song, and it is their job to recreate it, which means they have to find the instrumentalists, the vocalists, and everything, and they have to record those tracks, and then they have to mix those tracks and come out with a reproduction. Well, that's one thing. And most times, they get a song that they know or something like that. There was one project last year. I don't know. He's in his final year. At any rate, he came home and said he had a project. And I always thrive as soon as he tells us about a project. Yeah. I just love hearing about it. And he said his professor came to him. He had different songs on index cards and he was just passing them out to students. And he got to Nate, who's been on the dean's list, of course. Right. He got to Nate and he stopped and he started shuffling through his cards. Right. And then he stopped and he handed Nate a card. And it was the song by the Beatles. It appeared on the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. And it was Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. I had never heard of this song, even though I grew up in the Beatles era. Yeah. I had never heard this song. Yeah. So I went to my best friend, Google.
Yes.
who sent me to his best friend, Wikipedia.
Yes. Yep.
And learned of the background of this song. And what you hear in the recording that you think is an organ is actually a calliope.
Now, what is a calliope?
Well, it's usually you heard them in the circus. It's like the organ that you hear like during circus parades and everything. It's a type of organ, but it has a very particular sound. Right. And I remember going to Nate and I said, how the hell are you going to get a calliope? So he wound up researching it. But I went, because I was so fascinated with the song and even the background of it, because at one point, John Lennon took pieces of it and just tore it in scraps and threw it on the floor and reassembled it. Yeah. It was such a fascinating background to this song that I put it on a piece of paper and laminated it and gave it to Nate. Yeah. And I said, here's the song you're doing. Yeah. And he read it and he became fascinated with the background. Yeah. And he later said to me that knowing the background of that song made all the difference in the world to him. Yeah. Well, he wound up doing the project successfully. He didn't find a calliope, but he kind of replicated the sound on a keyboard. Right. And on most of his projects, he does lead guitar, rhythm guitar, drums, and he gets a friend of his, a gal, to come in. It's the vocalist in his band, actually, and she comes in and does the vocals. Yep. And now he's starting to even do keyboard. And then you put it all together, and he got a great grade. Yep. But I guess all of that I'm telling everyone is because if you have a song that really resonates with you, I encourage you to look on Google and look up the background of that song. Yeah. Understand why that artist chose the lyrics they did, the tune they did, maybe even the key they did or the instrument they played when they did it. Yeah. it will make that song, it will make you own that song a lot more, and it will resonate with you even deeper.
Yeah.
That was my point of the whole story. But we all know I love talking about my grandkids.
Well, yes, and you should.
So, and you will at some point as well.
One day, yes, probably.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't ready either, but looking back, of course I was. You're always ready.
Okay, fair enough. But I don't think I want to be one tomorrow.
No, you don't have to be. Generally, it takes 9 months, though. So you do have a little bit of time.
I'd like that, but not tomorrow.
So, at any rate, it's come time to say farewell to our listeners today, wherever in the world you are, and I know you're all over the place. I truly thank you for tuning in and listening. Remember self-care, and self-care can be so simple as playing that song that really resonates with you and make you feel the feelings, because don't hold them in. They'll come out eventually. So choose when to come out. Sit on the couch, grab a glass of wine or a cup of tea, whatever your choice is, and close your eyes, listen to the music, and feel all the feels. And by all means, tune in again next week as we all continue to live and grieve. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.